Day 2 of the Art Supply Declutter. Today we're going to be dealing with paint palettes, brushes, paint tubes, drawing supplies, and a few other items here and there. The tubes, especially the watercolor tubes, are going to be a bit of a labor-intensive thing where I'm going to be humming and hawing about things constantly. So I think I'm going to leave those ones for last. And in the meantime, I'm going to get started with something that I know very well, which are my brushes. I use these very frequently and I've used all of them. I have 4 of these water brushes from Pentel, which I use for watercolor when I'm traveling. I enjoy these. I'm going to keep them. I have this rough bristled wash brush. It's just kind of a rectangular boy. I'm going to keep him. This round sponge guy I use a lot in turning newspaper into wrapping paper for my Etsy items, and it's honestly one of my favorite tools, so that one is definitely staying. It has a very loved space in its little brush cup. I've got another spongy boy. Again, I use this on a newspaper to turn it into wrapping paper, so I'm keeping that. I'm also gonna just keep these other 2 sponges because I use them for a variety of things, so they are staying. I have 2 palette knives, and I'm not very good at using them for mixing or for painting, honestly, but I am trying to learn a little bit more. They do have different purposes or uses for me depending on how big of an area I'm mixing with, so I'm going to keep both of them. I have a couple of brushes that are pretty similar, and yeah, like they're different lengths and the bend on them is totally different, but the circumference of these brushes is very similar, and I actually got them within the same week of each other, so like I wasn't really paying attention to what I was buying. I was too excited by art supplies, and yeah, oops, I ended up with 2 similar things. I don't need both of them, and I honestly prefer this guy more. I use it for watercolor painting, and it has nice effects, and it's also really good for flicking paint on stuff. And this is just a little stipple stencil brush. So this one is staying, and this one I think I'm going to pass on. I spent $1 on this at Mecca in Eugene. So yeah, that sucks. I could have used that $1 for something. I literally had no idea that wedge brushes existed until I saw someone on YouTube, so I saw it and I was like, oh yes, I have to buy one because that's just what my brain does when I'm excited about things, I guess. I spent probably around $7 or $8 on it, and I don't regret it. I actually really like this. It's quickly become one of my favorite brushes. But also, I really should have researched it a little bit more before just blindly buying something. Oh, and speaking about researching things before blindly buying them, I really regret buying this natural hair watercolor brush set from Artist Loft in Michaels. It only cost me $5, but all of these suck. They are very, very sheddy. They don't keep their shape. There's just a lot of problems with them. They don't bounce back in the way that I want them to when I'm using certain techniques. They were a waste of money. I should have instead just researched the brushes that I was more likely to use and then bought individual ones of those instead. So this was a waste. I do think I am going to keep one from the collection though, except not this one. This is a fan brush which I've kind of chopped to bits for texturizing effect, so I'm going to be keeping that one. And I'm also going to be keeping this fan brush from Lowe. It's supposed to be a acrylic brush, but I use it with watercolor. It seems to work all right. I recently got this #1 rigger brush from Mimic, and it's been interesting. I don't hate it, but it's been a huge adjustment. I've actually had a lot of fun with it. I'm going to keep that one around because it does make very nice lines. I've got a few other cheapy brushes thrown in here from various palettes and other packs of things I bought when I was in a shopping frenzy of excitement. This is one of them. I'm pretty sure this came from one of the palettes. It's not a terrible brush. It's just does not retain shape whatsoever. I don't think it's shed on me yet, but I don't need it, so I'm going to get rid of it. I'm keeping this 000 Windsor Newton Cottman brush. It's super teeny tiny. I feel pretty sheepish about this. This my dad actually bought for me as like an investment into my business, i.e. my Etsy shop, which was super, super nice of him. And I bought this thinking that it would perform like this actually does in reality. And what makes this even worse is like this was $149 and I'm pretty sure this was like almost 30 bucks. Oops. I feel kind of bad for, you know, I mean, my dad insisted on buying it, but I feel kind of bad because like I rarely reach for this. But yet again, we're learning that I need to research my stuff before I, you know, go shopping. And like, this thing is pretty great. Even though this thing doesn't work the way that I want it to, I'm not going to get rid of it. It's going to be great for larger pieces, and I'm just going to have to figure out a way to use it. I kind of have a sense of obligation to keep this, but it's just not been really practical for the things I've been making lately, but I'm keeping it because like, thanks Dad, I love you. Another one of my favorites is this number 7 Grumbacher round synthetic brush, so that one is definitely staying. I found a few more of those like cheapy Michaels ones. These ones are the Craft Smart line, which is funny because like one of my other favorite brushes comes from the Craft Smart line, but this does not suck. These do. Same problem with the watercolor brushes. Since they're natural bristle, they just shed and lost their shape and they were a pain, so I'm getting rid of those and this other brush from a palette. These two brushes I got in promotion from Jerry's Artorama, and I paid probably like $2.25 for them or something like that. I knew that they were going to be acrylic brushes, but normally I can fudge acrylic into working for watercolor. These I can't. Their bristles are very scratchy, but they're not like thick. They feel weird on the paper and they don't distribute things the way that I want them to. I'm going to give them a chance with turning newspaper into wrapping paper, and if they don't pass that, I will pass them along to a friend that actually works with acrylics or needs them or whatever. This itty bitty flat brush is going to stay. It's really good for getting into tiny little corners, and I'm going to keep this number 2 round Kolinsky from Mimic as well. Now we're kind of getting into like less used things territory. I know that I'm going to be getting rid of these 2 flat brushes because I really don't use them, and these flat brushes aren't really good for watercolor anyway. I don't find that they hold enough water or paint. So these 2 are going to go. I am going to keep the smallest one though because this is really helpful for making brick shapes. So that one is staying. I use filbert pretty much exclusively for making flower shapes. And this number 2, while I do like the size of it, there's just not enough bristles there and it doesn't keep its shape very well, so I'm going to get rid of that one. This number 6 one though, on the other hand, tends to be a little bit more rigid, so that one is staying. I have 2 angled brushes, one's from Lowe and one is from Princeton, and I'm going to keep the Princeton one, mostly because this Lowe's one is a little wobbly around the ferrule. I'm going to recrimp that and see if someone else wants it, because this one also just kind of performs a little bit better. And then I have a whole bunch of tiny little round brushes. I have a number 2 from Mimic, number 1 from Lowe, a number 3 from Lowe, and a number 5. Considering all my other round brushes, I don't need all of these. I'm pretty set on the small ones for the most part, so I think I'm going to get rid of the number 1 and the number 3 from Lowe. I'm going to keep the number 2 from Mimic because it's a bit shorter, it doesn't have as long of bristles, and I think I'm going to keep the number 5. Okay, so that's the brushes done, and I ended up getting rid of a ton, which is great. That's a morale booster. Next up, I want to work on my drawing supplies. I have a ridiculous amount of erasers because, oh God, this is so embarrassing. This is the original one that I got in a $25 set from Michaels. It works just fine. I don't have any complaints about it. And then I put an order in on Jerry's Artorama because I had a little surplus money and I was feeling very excited about the concept of doing art. So of course I obsessed on that, and that's what I spent my money on. and I got this as a free promotion from there, which is cool. Like, I guess a free thing, whatever. And this is where things just get excessive. I had a gift card to Walmart. I do not support Walmart as a corporation, but I literally cannot be a chooser because I am one missed paycheck away from literally being a beggar. So I used the funds that were on there, and I needed to get a kneaded eraser, and I could either get a single one that costs like $2, or I could get this in a set that costs $1.45. Of course, I picked the cheaper option, and now I have 5 erasers. They all work perfectly fine. I have no complaints about any of them. I think I'm going to get rid of these two because, you know, they're nice, but I like how squishy and effective and soft this one is. I'm most used to this one, and this kneaded eraser has pretty good erasing skills without messing up the paper. So these are staying. These two are going. This is masking fluid that comes with a like little tube applicator, which is a lot easier than trying to paint it on with the back of a paintbrush, let me tell ya. I'm keeping this. It seems to work all right. It's not the perfect product, but I'm convinced that there's no perfect masking fluid out there. I have various permanent markers, most of which are waterproof. This Sharpie I don't really use for art. I just use in my art journal. And then I've got Copics in various sizes, and this Pigma Micron one. This one is honestly my favorite out of all these 5. But I use this dropper to transport hydrated paint to different areas on my palette, so I am keeping that. I'm also keeping this pencil sharpener. Speaking of pencils, I have 2. I have this mechanical one, which I ran out of lead for, and I'm too cheap to rebuy, so I'm just gonna like give that to work. Someone can use it there. And I'm going to keep this sharpenable 2B pencil, which is okay. It's not like the ideal pencil, but I'll just buy another one that I can sharpen when I use this one up, and we'll experiment from there. And then the last pen I have is this Jelly Roll, which makes me feel super nostalgic when I use, but honestly it has a really cool effect over watercolors, and it's been really fun using this in an art sense and not like an angsty, like, oh my god, my life is terrible and it's the early 2000s in Seattle and like, this is taking a weird route. Anyway, let's divert back onto the course, which is colored pencils of 2 varieties. We have the regular old Crayola colored pencils, and we've got these Artist Loft watercolor pencils. I don't really see a need to get rid of any of them. The watercolor pencils I'm kind of getting acquainted with, and I've been using them for various things and various products, and I feel like if I got rid of them, they would get rid of options for me when I do my art. And the Crayola ones I use when I am planning my fiber art stuff, if I ever actually sit down and plan one of my projects. The vast majority of them are very spur of the moment, but I do have several sheets of paper that have like grand plans for amazing things, which I just haven't gotten around to. Let's take a look at the bottom of this art box. First up, there is a mess of lids that have either gouache or watercolor on them, and that needs to not be in here. I need to use those up in like a sketch or something. I also have an unreasonable amount of nitrile gloves because I want to try out finger painting with newspaper and acrylic. So yep, that's going to be a fun project someday. Let's just add that to the list of things I say I'm going to do but probably don't get around to. Painter's tape, I use this to tape down my paper so my watercolor paper doesn't go flying everywhere or get curly edges. This is another kind of embarrassment of a product. I use the spray bottle to re-wet paint in palettes, and you know, I'd been thinking about getting one for a while and everything, and I found one for 50 cents at Mecca, which is all cool and dandy because it was only 50 cents from a secondhand store. But like 2 days afterwards, I looked through my used glass containers for like my bulk shopping, and I had 2 cleaned out spray bottles from previous cosmetic items, and like, bro, I just keep buying things I don't need because I don't think things through, and that needs to change. Like, this has been such a weird thing, getting into art and being a minimalist and just buying things because I'm excited, which then makes me stressed out and then completely defeats the purpose because I end up with like multiples of things that if I had just been paying attention to what I have and what I've been taking in wouldn't be a problem, but here we are! And this is why we're decluttering! I have some more masking fluid, and honestly, I'm probably just going to hand this off to my friend that is better at applying this than I am. They bought the wrong color of it anyway. I have the off-white, they have the pure white, and they wanted the off-white because it's easier to see on the paper. So, yay, Rosie, you're getting this. Congratulations. I really doubt you watch my videos, but if you do, hey. The rest of the stuff in here is paint. So we are at the last leg of this declutter, I guess. This is all my acrylic paint. I use this, as I've referenced before, to turn newspaper into wrapping paper, and it's a fun little outlet, and it just kind of upcycles stuff. And yeah, I don't really see the need to get rid of any of these colors. I also have this big ass tube of white because I go through this like crazy. I want to do the palettes before I get into the tubes because that's just going to be mind bending. This first palette on top is from a $25 watercolor set from Michaels, and I've never really enjoyed using it. The quality of these, it's very low. Not to say that all inexpensive art supplies are bad quality, just this one in particular, not worth it. It's very grainy, and everything ends up being quite chalky at the end, and it transfers like mad. So I don't need this. Even for my sketch stuff, I still like that to look at least somewhat put together. This doesn't serve a purpose in my art supplies, so perhaps some child would find this a little bit stimulating, but for me it's not worth it. I have a Koi Watercolors Pocket Field Sketch box, and it's actually pretty nifty because it has this ring on the back, so you can be like, oh yes, look at me conspicuously being an artist in public. And I find it so cool. I like when things have multi-purposes. It's pretty great. But anyway, this has a lot of palette space, and as you can tell, I use this a lot. It comes with a water pen, which screws on the opposite direction as the Pentel ones, which is kind of confusing. But I get a lot of use out of this. This was actually the second palette I ever bought, and the quality of this is a step above the first one that I got, which we'll be looking at later. And I tend to use this a lot more for stuff that I would put on my store or give to people instead of just dinking around with. And I really enjoy it. My only complaint, and my complaint with all of these, and that's partially because, you know, I haven't been a responsible consumer, is that all of this is housed in plastic. Honestly, if I knew then what I knew now about options for sustainable and like handmade watercolor paints, I would have tried to go on that route. But honestly, at the beginning I was like, okay, I've got $15, I have an undying thirst for wanting to know how to do this, and I just ended up buying the cheapest stuff available to me, which unfortunately is also probably not the most eco-conscious. This palette is a $5 pearlescent palette from Artist Loft and Michaels, and it's okay. I wish I would have saved my money and actually bought an individual tube or tubes of colors that I did want, but for the price it's not a bad deal. My only complaint is that all of the metallic or the pearlescent shift seems to just be white. There's not really any other thing going on here apart from just a little bit of a white shimmer to it. I want to play around with pearlescent stuff on black paper, so this is going to stay for the time being. And this palette, which basically came to me this broke, was the first one that I ever bought, and this is a $5 Artist Loft one as well. I really enjoy playing with this one. It's not the best quality. It's actually a little chalky. There's a lot of filler in here, so the colors aren't very vibrant as they dry down. But it's been a blast getting to learn how to, you know, mix things and do stuff using this one. I actually really enjoy this shade, this shade, this shade, this shade, that one. I like a lot of them, but like several of them are actually like some of my favorite things. I just wish the quality was better so I could use it in long-lasting art pieces. But yeah, I basically just use this for noodling around and doing dumb stuff. Time for the main event of all of the tube paints. Luckily, I have swatched everything that I own in my art journal, so I have some pretty good swatches to go off of when determining things. Last night, I tried to pair together all of the shade duplicates from different brands to see which one I wanted more, which one performed better, and it just ended up making things more confusing because, like, the shades differed a lot, and there were some shades that I really liked both sides, even though they said they were the same shade and they're not the same colors, and it's just confusing. I'm also a little grumpy at myself for, like, not just getting a primary set of tube watercolors and learning to mix from there, because it's kind of made me lazy. I have enjoyed mixing individual shades and everything like that, but, like, I don't know. There are so many options in here, and I don't really want to get rid of many of them because it gives me a wider palette to work with, and I don't really see that as a disadvantage. But the sheer volume of like tubes of stuff that I have is making me a little nervous because there's just so much here. I can't see everything at a glance, so I have to dig through everything, and it's not a good system. I could upgrade my storage, but that would mean I would have to expand past that poor little rickety bookshelf. I guess we'll start over here. This is going to have all of my Turner watercolor tubes in the 5ml tubey boys. All right, Turner Concentrated Artist Watercolor 18-piece 5ml tube professional set. Looking at Permanent Scarlet. I mean, it's a scarlet. Pretty similar to Vermilion, actually, from a lot of the other sets that I have. I'm going to start another pile where I just put a whole bunch of stuff that I need to debate and then figure out which one I like the most and then just get over it so I can have less stuff and I can just force myself to learn how to mix stuff. Okay, we have Phthalo Green Blue shade. It's a nice green. Let's see. It's similar, kind of similar to Viridian. I will keep this one. I've got Burnt Sienna from Turner Watercolor. I prefer the Burnt Sienna from Turner to the one from Artist Loft, so I'm going to keep this one, and when I find the Artist Loft Burnt Sienna, I'm going to get rid of that one. I've got Permanent Yellow. I'm going to keep Permanent Yellow because I know that this one has a light fastness rating, whereas the one from Artist Loft, I don't know, so I'm going to keep this one. I think I'm going to keep the Phthalo Green. I'm going to keep Ultramarine for sure. That's one of my favorite shades out of the set. I'm going to keep Pyrrole Red. I'm keeping Ivory Black. I am keeping Sap Green. Their Maya Blue is not what I expected it would be. This was another instance of where I was just so excited and I had things kind of overlapping in terms of purchases. This past holiday season is where people just get me gift cards to places I would normally never patronize, but I got a Amazon gift card, and you'll see these paints later, but I got a set from Daniel Smith that had Maya Blue in it, and that was one of the ones that I've been after because it has this interesting granulation to it. And I totally didn't know that this set had it in there, and now I have two. This one doesn't granulate very much, but it has a very nice grayish, greenish undertone to it, so not a Maya Blue at all, in my opinion, but still a fun color, so I'm going to keep that. The Maya Yellow is kind of weird to work with, but I'm not mad about it. So I think I'm going to keep that one. Permanent Gamboge I'm going to keep because it has a light fastness rating. I've got a couple other Gamboges that I'm going to be picking through later. I'm going to keep Dioxazine Violet. Do I want to keep Burnt Umber? Yeah, I'm going to keep Burnt Umber, but I'm also going to keep the one from Artist Loft because that one is darker. I'm keeping their Turquoise Blue. I am keeping Maya Red, and I am going to be keeping Chinese White from Turner. Okay, let's start with reds and pinks. Got Marie's Crimson Red Gouache. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to put the Artist Loft Vermilion in the question pile. I'm going to put the Primary Red Gouache Tempera from Color & Co., which I got from Mecca, and the Crimson Red from Artist Loft in the maybe pile because they seem to be pretty similar. And I'm also going to throw in the Rose Madder watercolor in there because that one always ends up looking like the Color & Co. Primary Red if I mix it right or just dilute it right. I'm going to keep the Vermilion Gouache. I think I'm going to get rid of the Artist Loft Vermilion. I have Daniel Smith Rhodonite Genuine. I really enjoy this. This one is Staying. And then last one is Marie's Gouache in Rose, which I'm going to keep. Next up we have yellows. The first thing that sticks out as Staying is this busted ass tube of Grumbacher Academy Naples Yellow. The tube is kind of split, which is why it's sporting this fabulous tissue outside, but this shade is beautiful. I love using this as a base for lighter skin tones and for making nice desert scenes, so that is Staying. I love Naples Yellow. Holy mother butts. And I do have 2 tubes of Grumbacher Academy Gamboge Indian Yellow, and since I already have like a permanent Gamboge, there's not really any point in me holding on to 3 tubes of permanent Gamboge. But I will tell you that the batch on this one probably turned out better than the batch on this because this one performs a little bit better, plus this one's probably older. So I'm going to keep this one and give this one away. I'm going to get rid of this Artist Loft Lemon Yellow, as well as the Lemon Yellow Gouache from Artist Loft. Actually, no, I am going to keep this because the Marie's one is a little darker and I want like the lighter punch from this. So I'm going to keep that and the Marie's one. Pretty sure that I'd said I was going to get rid of the Yellow Ochre from Artist Loft, so we're going to jettison that. I'm also going to keep Yellow Ochre and Mid Yellow from Marie's Gouache, and I think I'm probably going to, yeah, get rid of Yellow Ochre from Artist Loft. On to the greens. I've got two Viridians here. They basically perform identically, actually. There's slightly more in this one, so I think I'm going to keep the Grumbacher one and then get rid of that one. I actually prefer the Artist Loft Viridian gouache because it's a little bit lighter and brighter in quality, but I will be keeping the Marie's one as well. Same situation with Pale Green with Marie's and Artist Loft. I'm keeping both of them. I'm keeping Jadeite Genuine from Daniel Smith. I'm keeping Phthalo Yellow Green, and I'm keeping Sap Green gouache from Marie's. Between the Marie's and the Artist Loft, I'm definitely keeping the Marie's Prussian Blue gouache because this one just does not really fit my description of a Prussian blue, and I'd be easily able to mix this between like the cerulean and the Prussian. So I'm going to be getting rid of that. I'm going to keep the cerulean blue from Marie's and get rid of cerulean blue from Artist Loft. This purple gouache from Artist Loft isn't very good, so I'm going to be getting rid of that. I'm also going to be getting rid of turquoise from Grumbacher Academy because it's just not the shade that I wanted, and I'm going to just pass that along to make some more room. I can mix that shade if I need to in the future. I'm keeping Mayan Blue Genuine from Daniel Smith, as well as Amethyst Genuine. I'm keeping Ultramarine Blue from Marie's. I'm also keeping their Mauve or Mauve Gouache. I'm keeping Violet from Artist Loft Watercolor. I'm keeping the Prussian Blue Artist Loft Watercolor, and I'm getting rid of the Saks Time Flow or Fine Flow Watercolor in Ultramarine. It's just very lackluster. So right off the bat, I know I'm going to be keeping all three of these whites, which I know sounds excessive because, you know, why do you need that many whites? Well, Marie's is weird. That's my explanation. The Artist Loft one is the pure white one, so this is just like stark white, so that one's staying. And then the white from Marie's is kind of like an off bonish color, and then their titanium white is more kind of like a cream, and these are really nice at lightening earth shades and mixing into skin tones and to just give an overall like earthen vibe to colors. So I like keeping those, and they're gonna stay there. This Reeves Flesh Tint watercolor I enjoy, so I'm going to keep it. And this Clove Turner Artist's watercolor is staying as well. This is another like neutral kind of like cafe latte shade that I freaking love. I really like earth tones when it comes to paints. I don't know why. I'm keeping the Marie's Black Gouache, and I am getting rid of the Artist Loft's one. I'm keeping Burnt Sienna from Marie's and getting rid of the Artist Loft counterpart. It was totally Burnt Sienna, the one that I was going to get rid of, not Yellow Ochre. Either way, if it's the other way around, I'm switching it now. So yeah, Yellow Ochre staying, Burnt Sienna is going. I'm going to get rid of... Do I have Chinese white from another brand? I think I'm going to pass on my Chinese white watercolor from Artist Loft. I'm going to be keeping Hematite Genuine from Daniel Smith. I'm going to be keeping the Burnt Umber watercolor from Artist Loft because it has a nice like walnutty depth to it that I like. I'm going to get rid of Lamp Black from Artist Loft. And actually no, I'm keeping Lamp Black from Artist Loft because the other one I have is Ivory and that's not dark enough. And then lastly, I'm keeping Piemontite Genuine. We've got these things which are going for sure. These things are maybe. Time to swatch these out. These are all very, very similar, but I think the only one I'm really going to use is this Rose Madder. It's just slightly pinkier, but very similar to the Crimson Red. So I'm going to be getting rid of these two. And I'm going to keep both of these because this is different enough from that, and that's more orangey, and I like orangey sometimes. And yeah, so these three are staying, and those other two, they are out of here. And with that, my art declutter is finished. Everything that you see in the foreground is stuff I'm getting rid of, and honestly, I did not expect to be getting rid of much out of this area, but I guess you surprise yourself occasionally. I feel like I've gotten a lot done. It took 2 days to like span everything out, so I better feel accomplished. And now I feel like my art supplies are a lot more under control and a little bit more pared down, and a little bit more reasonable for a single amateur person just kind of starting out. I also feel really good about getting rid of all the things that didn't bring value to my art kit anyway, so that's just another plus. I am going to have several happy art friends and several happy children that are going to be very excited to get all of these things. That's all we got for tonight. Thank you guys so much for sticking around, and I hope you enjoyed this declutter.